think what? Teeth. It's got thorns. You know he doesn't need it first. I know. Yeah.
Good morning, everyone. Welcome to those of you sitting here at the forum. Welcome to those of you who are watching from afar. Particular welcome to Ella and Jamie, Bishop Robinson's daughters, and truly his finest work, because I know they're watching from afar as well. My name is Tim Rich. I have the privilege of being priest in charge here. My pronouns are he, him, and it is a delight to make these introductions or renewal of friendships. In 2003, it was June 7th of 2003 when the Diocese of New Hampshire elected their 9th bishop. And the canon to the ordinary at the time, V. Gene Robinson, was elected bishop, much to the joy of the diocese, who knew him, loved him as just a faithful pastor and a good friend. In that summer consent process, we New Hampshire folk went to Minneapolis for the National Churches Convention, and we wore a button that read, "Ask us about Gene," because the National Church was about to be introduced to this guy whom we knew and loved in a way that was more than first openly gay man elected bishop in Christendom. Which was true, and yet barely a way to know Gene. So as people asked us about Gene, we said that he was a person of deep faith. We said that he had cared for and loved the congregations of the Diocese of New Hampshire for so many years. We said that he was one of the most thoughtful, insightful partners to the clergy in the Diocese of New Hampshire, and we said, look, this is a card-carrying Episcopalian right out of central casting in some ways. He went to an Episcopal undergraduate school, the School of the South Sewanee, and then to General Theological Seminary, which was a reasonably good seminary. I'm teasing, it's a wonderful seminary. And we said, so he's really a gift to the Episcopal Church, who he goes home to sleep with at the end of the day. Well, that's just his good fortune and his partner's good fortune, but that's not why we elected him to be bishop. So they asked us about Gene. That was when I had the pleasure of meeting Susan Russell for the very first time, who really was part of the group that introduced Gene to the wider church. And now many of you know Bishop Gene Robinson. It was Ed Bacon who first brought him here. We can't quite count how many times he's been here, but enough times to lose count and enough times for many of you to consider him a friend and a part of All Saints. So we are so fortunate to have him here. Let me just make another introduction, because much of what is going to be discussed in the next 40 minutes is the gifted work of Dominick DiOrio here, the composer of this great composition that is premiering here. It was a little more than a year ago that Gene was approached, having been ordained for 50 plus years, and then consecrated as bishop for 20 years, and was approached by Dominick and one other, Michael, with the notion of this composition. They're going to talk about that. Dominick is a brilliant composer. He's a professor of music in the School of Music at Indiana University in Bloomington. He's also, in all his spare time when he's not composing and teaching, he somehow jets over to Philadelphia, where he is the director of the Mendelssohn Chorus of Philadelphia. Then in his spare time, he also is married. In fact, he's jetting home back to Indianapolis to celebrate his 10th wedding anniversary with his husband about 10 minutes before the day ends. So, Dominick, we are so grateful that you would be here. Thank you for being here. A handful of choruses, choirs, communities were invited to premiere this composition. All Saints has the privilege of being the West Coast premiere site. They'll tell you about all of that and so much more. We're going to let them have a conversation with you and across each other. Depending upon how it goes, there may be time for questions and answers, or maybe I'm going to grab him by the arm and get him into church, because we're not done with him yet. But without further ado, I give you Bishop Gene Robinson and Dominick DiOrio.
Good morning. This is on, right? Oh, yeah, it is. Hi, I love being back here. Why has it taken me so long to get back? Damn COVID. Anyway, I'm just so glad. I've always said this is my church home away from home, and it continues to be. And I always carry you in my heart. So it's just so great to be with you for real. And to tell you the story of how this how this thing came to be. It's embarrassing, right? As you know, three friends who live in Provincetown approached me and said, "We'd like to do this thing. We'd like to talk to you about a project." And in preparation for talking about it, we want you to listen. I don't know if you even know this. We want you to listen to Aaron Copland's A Lincoln Portrait. I think that's the name of it. Yeah, and this is sort of what we have in mind. Well, first of all, it's a kind of a semi-major work. I mean, it's long and all that, and we never intended that. We wanted something that could be used in churches large and small, and across the board. So, but it's Aaron Copland's music, and then throughout there are periods when a narrator reads from Lincoln's second inaugural speech and Gettysburg Address and so on. It's very moving and lovely. So we met, and they're like, will you let us commission a piece of music for you? You have to like pretend it's like somebody else, because it's kind of overwhelming to think somebody would want to do that, and they said, much like the Lincoln Portrait, we want you to think of quotations from your sermons and so on and so forth that you would like to have read as part of the composition. And I actually did try for about 2 weeks, and then I thought, so I went back to them and I said, look, I am the wrong person to choose these things, because first of all, everything I've ever said is brilliant and important and significant and so on, and it's a little like asking someone which is their favorite child, right? Picking and choosing. So we ultimately decided, and Dominick can talk about this, that the composer, lyricist would pick those things, of course, after having absorbed way too many hours of my sermons and documentaries and books and stuff. So anyway, so I finally gave my permission for them to move forward with this. I didn't know Dominick, and but they did. One of the three of them is a trained musician And so, and despite the fact that his day job is as a fundraiser, he's really quite talented. And so they introduced me to Dominick, and we only recently met at the first two performances of this 2 weeks ago. So it's brand new, and we're very excited because there will be brass today, and we're very excited for that. So it's going to be terrific. And you know way better than I that your choirs are amazing, and so it's a privilege for us to get to hear this. And the last thing I want to well, of course it's not the last thing I want to say, but the next thing I want to say is we have had two performances of this, one at 4 o'clock on June the 1st at the Washington National Cathedral, followed 2 hours later at 6 o'clock by the Gaymen's Chorus of Washington. And two very different settings, right? Big church, big organ, professional singers, all of that at the National Cathedral. And then we go to St. Thomas, my parish, smaller church, the Gaymen's Chorus. Their offices are located in our congregation, in our church. And so we have this very close relationship. So it's very intimate. And they had asked Dominick to score the music for oboe, flute, bassoon, clarinet, and French horn. And so, this one says, oh, yeah, no problem. I'm like, how does he do that? Anyway, so I'm going to let Dominick take over and tell you sort of how he did this. He's just been such a joy to work with. And we only met each other for real 2 weeks ago.
In person, it's true. We
yeah.
had plenty of Zoom calls, though.
Many.
Yes. Yeah. And in fact, I, like all of you, knew about Gene before. In fact, I grew up in New Hampshire when I was a teenager. I actually grew up in Long Island. I talked and said coffee and said things like this. But at 11, I moved to New Hampshire, and I started college at Ithaca College in 2002. And that's when I was coming out. Right, at least first to myself, as we all know, and then to others gradually, and then to my family. And around that same time, the end of my first year, when I was dealing with all these questions, I was brought up in the Catholic Church, and that comes with its own set of inherited things. And I remember thinking, I don't know if there's a future for someone like me in that church. And I wasn't sure if there was a future for me anywhere in any church, right? I really didn't know what was possible. And that was at the same time when I was dealing with these really personal feelings and, depression, anxiety, all the things that come with wondering if you're welcome. And then there was news in June of 2003 about your consecration as bishop. And I was like, oh, wow. And this was in my backyard in New Hampshire, right? Not a place that I was traditionally thinking of as like supporting and a place where someone like me could have a life. So as I know it has been to so many, you have been an inspiration. You've provided a path. So I want to first say thank you for that, because that matters so much to me at a time when it was formative. And I don't think I would have been here doing what I do joyously without your model in my life at that time. So thank you. So when Michael, who himself is a fundraiser and an organist who I had known because he was also executive director of a symphonic choir in Indianapolis, and we had met at conferences and things, when he said, would you be interested in this project? We have this friend, you may have heard of him. We see him in P-Town. I'm like, where is this going? And it's Bishop Gene. And I was like, what do you want? And well, we want to write a piece to honor him. And we want it to be broadly accessible to communities across the world, right? Communities of faith, communities of singers, communities of people who gather. And we wanted to have a distillation of his joy and his message. And I was like, yes, absolutely. And Michael's vision of this, as was informed by his conversations with you, was that the piece had to be malleable. Right, so we heard a version at the National Cathedral which was sung by 14 people. with organ. We heard the gay men's chorus, tenor bass chorus, right, who sang it with 150 people in wind quintet and organ. And here today, you'll hear it with 80 people and brass and organ. So the commission was for a piece that had to be as broadly accessible as possible. There's a version for single singer, right, and organ as well. And I am pretty sure that we're going to have to create a version for piano as well for congregations that don't have an organ, right, which we haven't done yet. But I keep creating new versions of it because the hope is that this message will go beyond, right, any first performance. But to segue, it is true that I received 90 plus pages of sermons, writings, sayings, videos of you preaching, of you speaking, from you and from Michael. And going through that was also an immense joy, right? Because I did not have the privilege of attending your sermons or being a part of your parish. So to get to hear the words you inspired with by so many was inspiring to me. And then to think, how do I make, as you have, a single page, right, out of all of that? Well, one thing kept coming up in your sermons, which is this phrase of beyond our wildest imagining. You are loved beyond your wildest imagining. Could you talk about what that means to you?
Yeah, so it was amazing when, because I didn't tell you anything to put in there. So I got it just like you see it here, and was astounded that Dominick had named this Our Wildest Imagining, because it's the thing that I say so often, that my daughters tease me about all the time. I say it so much and believe it so profoundly. They absolutely rub my nose in it at every possible. I mean, today's Father's Day. Happy Father's Day, everybody. And I got a what?
It's right here.
Oh, there we go. Got a rose this morning from the choir, and it's lovely. I will probably get a message saying, "Oh, Daddy, we love you beyond your wildest imagining," because they never resist the opportunity to kid me about it. And then I get this finally, the lyrics, and that's what this piece is named, which, Dominick just pulled out of the many times I've said it. But it's a pretty great summary of what I actually believe, and the only reason that I've been able to do whatever it is that I've done, right, is that, and as you hear in here, I say that if you are certain of God's love for you, then there's almost nothing you can't bear. And I believe that with my whole heart. He picked that out of all of what I had said. So so it's near and dear to my heart. It's also incredibly weird to have your own words coming back at you like that. It's like, okay, well, you're on record as having said it. You can't exactly argue with it, right? And they're fairly brilliant things that I've said. So anyway.
Well, and one of the problems, I'm not a poet, but I've done a fair number of these libretti where you take texts from others. I've done some things where you ask a choir a prompt, a question, and then I'll get 50 answers to that question that I have to create a text from. So it's similar to that kind of work. But you have to take all of that and not just create a pastiche of like random sentences, right? You have to create some kind of form to that. And we knew also that Psalm 27 was important to you. Right, so there are excerpts from Psalm 27 in here, and it's designed in the music to actually be first sung by a soloist and then responded to by a congregation if desired. So you'll hear today, "The Lord is my light and my salvation, whom then shall I fear?" And if you want to, after you hear it, you can respond. You're welcome to sing it back in the service. Psalm 27 was important to you. Could you speak why?
It's the psalm that I credit with saving my life during the most difficult times, death threats and all that kind of stuff. And I love this psalm because basically it's like many psalms in this way, but this one is really very pointed. It's sort of like, "Oh Lord, they're out to get me. They're going to eat up my flesh and tear me from limb to limb," But then it says, "But you, O Lord, will set me high on a rock and keep me safe," right? And although it's not in this text, the psalm ends, and the translation that we have in our prayer book in the Psalter, the next to the last verse says, "What if I had not believed in the goodness of the Lord?" You know, like what would my life have been like instead had I not believed in the goodness of the Lord? And so that psalm, I mean, I still pray it to this day. And it's where that the thing comes from about if you believe in the certainty of God's love for you, there's almost nothing you can't bear. And so it's the thing that was closest to my heart during that time from Scripture, and I love that it's in here. Yeah.
Yeah, and we knew we wanted to have this option of participation, right? We knew that we wanted to see some congregations would want to have that response, to be involved in the piece. And we knew we didn't want it to be too long, right? We knew 6-7 minutes was about the length of a festival anthem that we would want in a church service or in a performance, right? And so you'll see that the psalm comes back, it's the 4th paragraph, and then the 8th. And between that, you have 3 stanzas that are behold, be still, be loved, behold, behold, behold. And the way that works is to create some kind of form, which is ultimately A, B, A, B, A, right? First, second, first, second, first. In the first verse, we have, behold, my friends, a new day is dawning. We are called to face the humble truth if we are to rise to the challenges of the future. Skip down 5 stanzas to behold, my friends, a new day is dawning. The same text, and we shall rise to the challenges of the future because fighting for justice is always dangerous business. I knew that so much of your sayings had to do with action, right? With, where is it behind us? Courageous justice, radical inclusion, right? There was an element of a call to action present in so much of what you did. So each of the first 3 stanzas we have is then reinterpreted with what we're going to do about it in the second A section, right? When, after we've heard the first psalm.
And the language, the challenges of the future, comes from 2009 when Barack Obama invited me to pray the invocation at the opening inaugural event at the Lincoln Memorial, and that's from that prayer. So again, my words come back to haunt me, but they're pretty nice.
They are. They're great words. And be still, my friends, a first fire is lighting. We are called to speak a calming word if we are to quell the storms which rage in our midst. Skip down to behold, my friends, a first fire is lighting again. And we will quell the storms which rage in our midst because we were not made to simply vanish in the night. 3rd stanza. Beloved, my friends, a spring seed is sprouting. We are called to joy against impossible odds. I love that phrase. If we but hold in our hearts the certainty of God's love. Skip down again. Behold, my friends, a spring seed is sprouting, and we will hold the certainty of God's love in our hearts, because they tried to bury us without knowing that we were seeds. Right? What a line. It's so inspiring. I mean, the joy in setting these words, the music just sort of came easily. Right? Because I knew that we wanted this to be emblematic of your energy. And true, I met you in person 2 weeks ago, but in the Zoom call, I got an immediate sense of your exuberance, your extroversion, your...
Really?
Vivacity for life, if you will. And I wanted the music to have that sense of propulsion, momentum, rhythm, energy. And so you'll hear that today. And then I knew the final section, we went A, B, right? Stuff, psalm. I knew the last one had to be about love.
Yep.
Right? And I knew that it had to be about what that has meant to you so much and what your model of love has meant to so many. Right? The joy against impossible odds. Do you remember where that came from?
No.
I don't either. But
it makes sense, doesn't it?
It's the thing that still stands with me, like if I step away from the piece and hear it in my mind a day or 2 later. And it's because everyone in the chorus is singing unison when that comes in, both times. And in the music, I repeated it because I just really thought, we face impossible odds all the time, or something that may seem impossible, right? And the fact that we meet that with joy, with resilience, that's, I think, what you did for all of us as a community.
Just to go back slightly, the thing, this wonderful phrase about they tried to bury us, they didn't know we were seeds. So I first saw that on a makeshift sort of memorial to Michael Brown in Ferguson, Missouri. I'd never heard this saying before. So I set about trying to find out where it came from. And all but one entry that came up on Google called it a Mexican proverb. And indeed, it had been used by the Zapatistas in their revolution in western Mexico. But there was one entry that indicated that it came from a Greek poet back in the 1950s who turns out to have been gay. You know what? I don't even remember his name. I'll find out. We'll. Anyway, he was completely marginalized and sidelined by the literary community in Greece in the 1950s, and I mean it's a model of intersectionality, right? So you have that happening in Greece, then it pops up in Mexico, right, in a revolution, and then it pops up in a African American community in Missouri, and I was just captivated by the saying and the wisdom of it and the hope of it, right? They think they're burying us, ha ha ha. We are seeds, and we will sprout again. So that's where that came from, and I love that story about the poet.
You mentioned when your words come back at you, it's kind of, hard to experience. As someone who hears my music coming back at me all the time, I think I'm used to it now, right? But was that the first time for you 2 weeks ago to have that experience, or has it happened before?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The only time we had heard even just a piece of it in a Zoom call on what I claim is a $29 keyboard, electronic keyboard that Dominick has in his office. He kind of played it, but it is nothing like hearing it for real. Mm-hmm. And I think you're going to really enjoy it. It's unspeakably beautiful, I think.
Well, we're so lucky. It's part of a large consortium of commissions, right? All Saints, of course, is one of the lead commissioners. There are 10 lead commissioners. One of them is the Friends of Gene Robinson, who are Michael and his husbands. We also have Washington National Cathedral, Gay Men's Chorus of D.C., St. John the Divine in New York City, All Saints in Atlanta.
I'm sorry.
Christchurch. St. Luke's in Atlanta.
St. Luke's in Atlanta.
St. Paul's in Philadelphia. Christchurch in Indianapolis. Right. It's a great consortium, and it will be performed through next May, I think, by all of these groups. Right. And so we have this really joyous tour, if you will, of going around.
I've been thinking of getting a T-shirt made with all of our dates on it, like a rock and roll tour. But haven't gotten around to doing that yet. But
well, and as we discovered, it's going to sound different everywhere, right? Because it was designed to be so different, right? And today won't sound like any other performance we hear.
Yeah, which is a great tribute to him, right? That it can take on the flavor of the people doing it. It's really joyful, and that was what was so fascinating back 2 weeks ago to hear it that close together. But it sounded like a different piece to me. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, and that people don't always understand what composers do. I like to think that we're like tailors, right? When someone commissions a piece for us, I am writing a bespoke piece of music for you, for your group, for your performers, right? It should fit you, right? And so how do you write a bespoke piece for 10 different groups that are all different, right? That was a new challenge, not one I had encountered before. Yeah. And so far it's successful. We'll see. We've got 7 more to hear after today. So
yep.
Do you want to take some questions, you think?
Sure.
Yeah.
Do we have time?
Do we have time?
Yeah. We've got about 10 minutes of time. So think about a question you'd like to ask. I want to ask this one quite serious question, actually. As I was listening to the themes of joy and of love in this composition, and as I've listened to you preach those themes, so given what you have endured in your life, given what we are enduring, in fact, in this country and around the globe at this very moment, how do you have the audacity to preach words about love and joy?
What a great question. You should come and hear my sermon. It's coming up in about half an hour.
I got a brunch to go to.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm not going to.
Yeah, I'm going to try to this morning do a little teaching about the doctrine of the Trinity. This is Trinity Sunday, and the only Sunday in the church year dedicated to a doctrine of some kind. And then I'm going to try to tie that to what's going on right now. But I'll give you a little hint.
A little teaser.
A little teaser. So, you know, it's something more profound, but something like whistling in the dark, right? But before you can find the light, sometimes you have to whistle for a while in the dark, and put your faith and your hope out there, not just for others to hear, but for you to convince yourself of it. Remind yourself of it. I actually think it's one of the reasons for coming to church, like to be reminded of this vision that we have of God's hope for us. You know, sometimes you can't believe something, but you can believe somebody else believes it, and take encouragement from that. And so it's a little bit like that. Or it may be like a fake it till you make it, right? It's like we have to get, I think, in these times, used to practicing what we may not even be feeling at the time. Because, as you'll hear me say, we didn't get where we are in America quickly or simply. And we are not going to get out of where we are quickly or simply. And we've got to be in this for the long haul. And I think part of what I like that Dominick has pulled out here is a little bit about that, which is about how do we. I was actually going to go into this morning, and then I thought, well, you know, a 2-hour sermon probably won't go over all that well. But one of the things that I actually did was I put together a spiritual survival kit, of which Psalm 27 was a part, right? And I think we all need to remind ourselves of the resources that remind us of what we actually do believe, even if it looks like at the moment they are not winning the day. And you keep doing that and practicing that, and not only reassuring yourself of that, but anyone who can, within the sound of your voice, can hear those words and possibly hold on to them long enough for us to turn this thing around.
And nothing would make them happier than to snuff out our joy.
Yeah. And so this is a in-your-face joyful piece, right? Like, take that, you brute, right? Which makes it kind of holy, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Yes, it does. Okay, questions? Raise your hand. I'll come running to you. Okay, we got 5 minutes. Here we go. Quick questions, because we just got 5 minutes total, okay?
My name is Luis Hernandez. I'm not an educated man as far as degrees go, but educated enough that right now my people live in fear. You know, what's going on in downtown. How can this help us in it right now? I took a risk going to downtown to catch a train to get over here. I haven't ridden the bus in 2 weeks because of this. I'm afraid of what's going on. But at the same time, I felt like wanting to lift up a AK-47 and lifting a revolution against the powers that be without mentioning names. How can we make this work for us? Simply.
Yeah. It is a great question. So one of the things I want to tell you about my parish in D.C., Washington, D.C., St. Thomas DuPont Circle, is, remember when the governor of Texas rounded up people who had come across the border and put them on buses and sent them to New York and D.C.? Well, my church is where they unloaded in D.C., and they have completely transformed our congregation. And we are one congregation that speaks two languages, not two congregations that speak one language each. And so it has transformed our lives in the sense that it has allowed us to get to know and be in solidarity with, in a very real way, a group in this country that is being treated cruelly and randomly, violently, and in all kinds of awful ways. And so I think one of the things that we're called on in this time to do is to get, we're always called to get to know those on the margins, right, and the oppressed, and to stand with them and to stand up for them. And I think that this is going to call for that. And now I think I will probably say in my sermon, I think we're going to all be called on to do some courageous things. I mean, I don't think we can get out of this without doing some courageous things. And I mean for just good old, plain old, common people to do some uncommonly courageous things. And so I think part of what we ought to be doing in church is building up our courage, right? And a great example of that is Bishop Mary Ann Buddy, my bishop in Washington, D.C., right? Here's this soft-spoken, angelic voice saying these unbelievable, powerful words to the most powerful human being on the planet. And, she didn't just come up with that 2 minutes before she said it. First of all, she and any decent preacher has been saying it for, thousands of years, really. And, but her latest book is called Learning How to Be Brave, right? It would be a good forum topic or whatever.
It actually, we had 2 classes during Lent to read the book.
Okay, great. Well, so she was amazing, but I think the main thing to remember is that, she prepared her whole life for that moment. And because she prepared, she didn't know when that moment would come, but when it came, she was ready to seize that moment. And as someone called it, it was the sermon heard round the world, and deserved to be. So I think we ought to be thinking of ourselves in training, right? Getting fit to do these courageous things that we'll need to do.
Thank you so much. I'm afraid we're going to have to bring this to a close because we got to get them dressed and mic'd.
Got any good ideas for a sermon?
Our thanks to Bishop Gene Robinson and to composer Dominick DiOrio. There are books, a copy of Gene's latest book on the table there. Dominick will be staying